Well, hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 17 of March Comes In Like a Lion. And last episode I was so giddy. I loved episode 16 so much. It's one of my favorite episodes so far. I love the dynamic that is building between Rei, Nikaido, as well as this new character has joined them that's such a sourpuss, and Shimada, of course, my angel Shimada, who I've latched onto like a toddler to a parent in a grocery store. I am so excited to see where this goes between those characters, and so I couldn't wait. As soon as I saw the comments for episodes 13 and 14, I was like, and 15, I was like, I need to go ahead and do it. So yes, I do have a couple comments, though, that came out of episode 14. As I said, I'm reacting a little bit ahead, so I'm sure some people, they've corrected me a little bit and gave me some information about Nikaido and Shimada's teacher, what they could tell me without spoiling, and so I feel like I'm like, ugh, this was episode 14, so the next couple episodes, y'all are going to have to just bear with me, and then until you catch up and see where I've been corrected, but let's go through these comments real quick. Clayproof talked about how salt and water, because I was questioning back in episode 14 about the uses of it, and they said that it's been used during emergency situations to help prevent dysentery, which number one destroyer of all my characters in Oregon Trail. So if you don't know what Oregon Trail is, you are probably under the age of 30 and did not grow up with the little Microsoft games where you played Oregon Trail and tried to like get from one side of the US to the other. And I swear every one of my people, I never made it. They all either died of dysentery or I ran out of buffalo meat and I didn't have enough bullets to hunt because I'd sold it all off. They had it to where you could play it a few years back, and I played it, and I almost got to the very end, and I was so pissed because I got right to the very end, and there's like this one river you have to cross. It's like a damn game of chance whether you get over the river or not, and I didn't, and I was like, Anyway, they said the salt in water helps the body to absorb water. Obviously, you don't want to drink straight up salt water, but a little teeny bit is often used in sports drinks alongside sugar, so makes sense, right? I don't know the electrolytes and how all that works, so I appreciate Clayproof, you giving some insight into that. Black Cat 0497 talked about how just Soya is not Nikaido's teacher, and I was like, okay, fair enough. Soya is not Nikaido's teacher. That's all we need to know. Thank you for the clarification. And then Jaunt345 said that one, whenever Shimada was talking about coming up with Soya, didn't mean that they were taught by Soya, but rather it means that they started playing professionally around the same time. And they also made a note that I thought was really interesting in that Soya is the prodigy and Shimada is the one who's had to put in the hard work and diligence to get where he's at. And I kind of like that. In a lot of ways, it's really interesting. You have Soya and Shimada, but then you have Rei and Nikaido, and in some ways they're similar because Soya seems to be the prodigy, Rei seems to be the prodigy, and Shimada and Nikaido, who are brothers, seem to be the ones that have had to put in the hard work and diligence. But then on the flip side of that, there are times where Rei is the one that's putting in the hard work and learning the basics. He's just got some intuition, and Nikaido kind of seems like a prodigy too. So I like that Nikaido and Rei and Soya and Shimada have similarities as rivals, but they're not the same. And I think that's really cool. So I like that y'all pointed that out. So thank you for pointing that out in the comments. I really appreciate that. It's very, very appreciative as we move forward. But yeah, I'm super excited. Real quick before we begin, I want to give a special shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon, to thank not only the subscribers on YouTube and those in any of the tiers on Patreon, because I appreciate all of your support, no matter how you support me on Patreon, but the philanthropy tier members, they go above and beyond, so they get some extra recognition. So thank you to Alex Cornejo, thank you to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Bryant Reed, to Dana, to Danger Zone, to Davarin, Danny Don Mai, Destiny Marie, Eric Ichu, Ghostly Turnip, Fisho, Kiri, Elfreya, Linden, as well as Matthew Palfinier, Murphew, Nameless Monster, Nicholas, as well as Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, and Translucent Men. I really appreciate your support. All of my love. So yeah, let's get this started. I'm excited. I got off work early and I was like, you know what? I totally want to watch March Comes In Like a Lion because I have been patiently waiting till the comments so I could look at them and then dive into this episode, and now's the time. So, with that being said, we are going to start episode 17 of March Comes In Like a Lion, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it to it, Lars. My dog's like, throw my toy, winch. The complicated emotions of this episode. The complicated emotions. We need to talk about Kyoko. We need to talk about Kyoko, I guess, in this. And I will try to maintain as open-minded a critique of her as I can, because I got pretty heated up about her. I was with Hina. I was like ready to smack down. I was like, girl, Hina and I, we were connecting. But based on Akari's reaction, I want to kind of go back, and I feel like Kari is of sound mind and principles. I want to go back and kind of reevaluate Kyoko and the whole situation in this episode. But 3 chapters. We get 3 chapters in one in this episode, which was really, really cool. There's a lot to talk about, so I kind of want to go through this like bit by bit and do it chronologically, because if I just dive into Kyoko, we will get off track very quickly. So let's just start skipping the OP and getting down to brass tacks. So basically we have the Lion King tournament. I like that they give Toji Soya just the title of the Lion King. It's just, he's the Lion King, and then we have poor Kai Shimada 8th Dawn facing one another. And honestly, having it at this bougie ass hotel, which hotel is bougie. If a hotel has its own garden center and koi pond, it's bougie. But I totally feel where Ray is coming from. When I just graduated high school, and it was like my first or second year of college. I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. I remember a group of us that were friends. We saved up our money and we went and spent a weekend at Memphis, Tennessee in the US. And there's this really famous, very bougie hotel called the Peabody there in Memphis. And it's beautiful and it's very bougie. All the upper class people go there to hang out and have drinks and cocktails, and they have like a fountain and they have ducks that walk around. It's very bougie. And I remember when I was 18 or 19 thinking that was like the bee's knees. And so when you're that age, going to this fancy place that seems kind of closed off and just for adults, it feels so exclusive. And so being 17 in Ray's shoes, I can imagine why this would be like a harrowing experience. You're like, oh crap, I'm with the adults now. And it's not just at this random shogi hall in town in my neighborhood. It's at this very elite hotel. So it feels more professional. It just, I could relate to Ray so much in that moment of thinking of my own teenage years and how going to something like that is such an experience. And I love that they show us the ambiance of the hotel, the gathering, how fancy it is. This series is so good at giving you the vibe of the atmosphere. And what I like about it too is that not only the soundtrack, but the setting plays such a role in this series. Like the rainfall, and we'll talk about that when we get to the pond scene, but the rainfall and the way that setting is used to describe the location, the use of sound design. I thought for a second, we'll get to that scene with Soya, but I thought for a second that my computer had stopped, the sound had stopped working, and I was like, do I check it? Do I just let it go? But no, it was just silent. Just whew, no sound. And so, of course, Nikaido and Ray have to have the red and blue ties because they're rivals. They have to mix match. Of course they do. But Shimada's getting interviewed by his fan base and everything. I love Nikaido in this episode and how he kind of gives Ray a taste of healthy resolve, right? Because Kyoko's whole goal is she wants to break Ray down. She wants Ray to feel as pathetic and awful as she does. Little does she realize he kind of already feels that way. So it's like, girl, you don't have to try. He's already there. You're not helping things. But the thing of it is, and to try to understand where she's at and why Ray's helping her, because she frustrates me to no end. And I'm like, Ray, you're too good for her. But he feels obligated as her brother. And there is something I really respect about Ray, and that he's her support network. He's all she has. He's not all she has, but he's all that she thinks she has, right? Because he's the one that's like taking care of her and like offering her a place to stay and letting her eat the food that's not hers. And he doesn't argue with her and he doesn't send her away. Like, we'll talk about it when we get to that scene, but Rei is developing a support network, right? And Kyoko's jealous of it. Kyoko is jealous of those three sisters and that he has that. And that's why she spouts off that nonsense about him ruining their home too. And Hina gets close to putting her in her place. I feel like Akari's going to let it go until Kyoko says something to her face about their place not being a home for him. And then I think Akari will be like, now hold on a second. I feel like Akari, we'll talk about that scene when we get to it. I'm getting ahead of myself. But the thing about it is, Rei is gathering a support network around him. Not just the sisters, but Nikaido is a positive means of support for him. Because Nikaido's kind of like, he's like, you need to sit next to Shimada and watch the match because we need to support him. We need to show support for Shimada. He's like, I'm his brother. And we do get confirmation. I've suspected it, but we get confirmation that he's like, Nikaido and Shimada are not biological brothers. He's a brother to him in the form that he's like a disciple, right? It's kind of like a broship, a student mentorship, but he calls himself his brother, right? And kind of like how Rei is with Kyoko, honestly. They're not legally siblings, but they are in spirit. Kind of like Shimada is Nikaido's brother in spirit. And Rei doesn't want to Rei's like, I don't want to get up on there. I don't want to impute. I don't want to get there. And Nikaido's like, we're from the same workshop. We've been practicing. We have to show support for him. And plus we need to be learning from him and what it's like in this environment. He's around all these unfamiliar people and he's stealing himself, but I want to support him so he's not worn out. Nikaido gets it. Nikaido's like, if he's just around these strangers, it's going to drain him and we can't let that happen. He's got to survive 6 matches to get to the last one. So he's like, my brother is very considerate towards others. He's not going to mind that you're there. He's nice. And then I love when Nikaido turns around and Rei's like, it's nothing. He's like, I haven't thought that far ahead. I get it. And so he wonders if Nikaido's more mature than him. And I'm like, no, I don't think that Nikaido overall is more mature than Rei. I think that he definitely has more support than Rei. And he's had a very different life than Rei. And he's in a very different psychological state than Rei. But I don't think he's necessarily more mature than him. But he has a much more steeled resolve. Because then Nikaido's like, I want to get used to this atmosphere so that when I'm here battling the top rank at the Lion King, I'll know what to expect. And that kind of completely blows Rei's mind. He's like, what do you mean when it's you? And he's like, when it's me. He's like, I'm going to be here eventually. And not only do I think Rei hadn't thought that far, but Rei hadn't considered it a possibility. I mean, Rei knows he's good and he wants to keep playing shogi, but I don't even know if Rei hadn't thought to the point of getting to face Soya. He just wanted to face Goto because he had a grudge against him, and that was as far as he'd gotten. But Nikaido's like, oh no, I've already planned long term. He's like, I've already got it planned out. I'm gonna get here. I'm gonna get to A rank. I know it's gonna happen. I just gotta keep working hard and I'll get there. And I feel like it's good for Rei to see people like Nikaido. He's like, when it's my turn to play in the title match, of course. And Rei's like, how can you say that so matter-of-factly? And he's like, I'm going to have my shot. It's going to happen. I was like, I can visualize it. If I didn't think that, how could I go on? And that's the big thing, is that Rei's like, oh, seeing Nikaido say that, because Rei's been struggling to find, what's my purpose? Why am I playing shogi? What's my end goal? Am I just doing it to make money? What's driving me forward? And Nikaido has something driving him forward. He's like, I'm going to play in the title match. That's what I'm working towards. I have a goal. It's long term. I'm working towards it. And I feel like Rei's goals right now are very short term. He has a better mentality than he did at the start of the series, but he still needs to develop these longer and longer term goals than just, I'm doing this week to week to survive. And I think it's important that he sees Nikaido kind of having this resolve, and it shakes him. Speaking of shaken, Kota shows up, and I will be honest, Kota and the chairman, they style their hair similarly. They both have glasses. They're both gray-headed. So during the reaction, I was like, is this the chairman? Is it Kota? Until you can see their eyes. Kyoko has Kota's blue eyes. So that's kind of how they're similar. But And the chairman is like eccentric and over the top in his personality. Otherwise, they're very similar in how they look and dress. So it's a little hard to know the difference between them unless you're really thinking about it. So he's like, my peer has hardened his resolve. What am I gonna do? So let's talk about this scene with Kota. I instantly, Ray has this defeated body language. And here's the thing. From the conversation with Kota, he's not that bad. And I'm going to say this as a 36-year-old. He's not that bad. I don't know. Here's the thing. We've seen how Goto treats Ray in semi-private. Whenever they're in a public location, but he's where only him and Ray can hear, we've seen how Goto acts, right? And it's sleazy and gross. With Kota, they're off to the side. Kota could be a total asshole, but he's not. He's like, hey, I've noticed you're putting your winnings in a bank account that I started with you. You know, if you want to take them out, we can move them to your own account. And once you're 18, I really intend to do that. I don't want you thinking you have to pay me back. I'm like, that's incredibly nice. Like, for context, I had a friend growing up in high school whose parent, his mother, remarried. His mother and father divorced. He lived with his mom. She remarried. Huckleberry, be nice. She remarried. And when he turned 18, he went off to college, and he had a bank account that he signed on with her and co-signed with her. And because he was 18, he needed a co-signer. Once he turned 18, he went off to college. It reminds me a lot of Ray, because this kid, his name was Kyle, and he was such a nice person. He reminds me a lot of Ray. But he had, with his mom and his stepdad, this co-signed account. And the stepdad and the mom took all of his money out of it. And while he was at college, and he was like, they got mad at him and took his money away, and basically kind of did the stuff that like Kyoko's doing to Ray. They kind of did the same thing to him, and it was very undeserved. It was just sleazy and awful, and they just wanted his money, and they took it away, and he had to drop out of college, and he's doing fine now. It all worked out in the end, long story short, but there, for a while there, it was really hard on him. And I'm like, if Kota was really a totally villainous character, he could be doing the same thing that those parents did to him. He could be taking Ray's money and making it to where it was hard for Ray to have an apartment or to have resources. But he's doing the exact opposite. He's saying, hey, here's some money for you. I'm going to make you an account. You need to, become an adult and start taking care of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And the thing about it is a lot of this stuff, yeah, and I'm not going to say that Kota deserves an entire pass, a free pass. We haven't seen what's happened with the brother. It would be nice to see what the brother's life is like at this point. But Kyoko makes Kota out to be like he's the worst person imaginable. And I'm like, girl, a lot of these daddy issues some of them are kind of in her head. Because I'm like, he's concerned about her. She's 22, so she's a grown-ass woman. He can't make her stay home, but he's clearly concerned. And it's almost like he's been trying to tell himself, like he knows her not coming home at night. He knows she's seeing someone. He wants to know who it is to probably make sure she's safe, that she's not getting abused or worse. And so I don't blame him for asking her, like, who's your boyfriend? Why don't you bring him over to meet us? Are you okay? Are you coming home? And it is somewhat of a bad thing for him to be telling himself that she's with Ray when he knows that she's not. But seeing how she reacts, he's like, well, what can I do? I can't make her stay home. She's 22 damn years old. But he cares about her. And a lot of this, I'm like, Kyoko, your dad clearly cares about you. Maybe you should try connecting with him and talking to him. Maybe you should vocalize some of your thoughts about all of this instead of either burying it deep inside of you or forcing it onto your foster brother and who's already in a mentally depressed state. So, and the thing about it is, it's kind of a maturity thing. Like, Kyoko is not mature at all. She wants to think that she is, but she's a child. And for her to be 22, I'm like, you're old enough, you need to be taking some responsibility for yourself. And the frustrating thing is I can relate to Kyoko in some way, shape, or form. Like I feel like every teenager, you get mad at your parents at some point, and you may think that they do some like crazy stuff. And I'm like, but eventually, when you get in your adult years, you grow up. And you either keep those relationships with your parents or you leave. But if you leave, you got to grow up and be self-sufficient and take on that responsibility and be like, okay, I chose to leave. Now I got to do something about it. And she is not maturing. She's not growing up. She's in this endless cycle of self-pity where she's like, woe is me. And she's projecting onto Ray. She's telling Ray, like, Ray, why are you in a pity mode? And I'm like, it's not Ray, it's you. You're just projecting all that on Ray. Anyway, we'll talk more about this. But I'm like, from the conversation, I'm like, Kota's not doing anything wrong. He's just kind of like, you know, he may not be a good dad, but he's like, I don't want to think that you have to pay me back, right? And then the chairman shows up, and he's like, and the chairman doesn't make things better. He's like, oh, spend your money on a girlfriend. And it's like, Ray's like, no, I'm spending it on my foster sister who's being ridiculous. But yeah, he's like, oh, you could spend your money on cigarettes, questionable pubs, gambling, and sake. I like Akari's pub is not questionable, by the way. But he can't do that because he's not of age yet, right? And so then Kota's like, hey, how about you leave us alone? So he's like, well, I'm not going to mess with your money. I'm not going to do anything. But once you come of age, you need to do something. And that's when he's like, how is Kyoko? Now, should he be following up with his daughter? Yes, absolutely. Can I blame him for not because of the way she acts? No. She acts awful. Whenever you try to confront her with a problem, she immediately gets defensive and immediately puts it out on you. I don't blame her. But, you know, I'm kind of like, I don't feel too sorry for her because I'm like, as someone that came from, you know, a slightly abusive household myself, I'm like, he's never hit you before. Has he? No? So, bitch, what? I'm like, you know, I'm like, do you really have it? Yeah, he didn't pay enough attention to you because you didn't think you were a good shogi player. Okay, but what? Right? You know, if he had been abusive to her and like physically abused her or mentally abused her, yeah, I get it. I'd be like, yeah, I wouldn't go back home either. But the most mental abuse he's done is that he told you to stop playing shogi and your reaction was to not keep playing shogi. Instead, it was to just wallow in pity about it. I mean, play me a song on the world's smallest violin, but I don't feel too bad for you. You know, he wasn't abusive to you physically. He cares about you. He wants you to come home. He's not, you know, I feel like if he wanted to, he could go find her and make her come out and expose Goto, but... And as soon as he asked her, like, you know, what was going on, and Ray said no, I was like, as soon as they took that photo together, I'm like, oh, Kyoko will jump to the worst conclusion and think that he snitched on her. And I'm like, girl, maybe you're feeling guilty and you should do something about that. And the thing about it is, if Ray told, the complicated thing is, I get why Ray doesn't say anything. I get it. Because Ray's like, shit, Goto was one of Kota's students, apparently. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I could see why you wouldn't want to tell him about it, because then what's going to happen is if he finds out it's Goto, I would hope Kota would be pissed at Goto, right? And I would assume he would be. He would probably confront him and be like, the fuck are you doing with my daughter? You're 20 years older than her. You're married. Stop. So I feel like it would end horribly, and I get why Ray doesn't say anything. And plus, it's not Ray's business to say anything. He's like, this is not my business. You need to go find your daughter if you want to talk to her. I don't want to be the middleman. So I get Ray completely. I get why he doesn't want to say anything. It is not his business. It is not his problem. I get that. And I feel bad for Ray being stuck in the crossfires of these two, because he's like, I'm trying to like live away from y'all to stay away from it. That's the problem, is Kyoko is bringing the drama to him. Like, girl, I'll talk about her in a second, but I'm like, Ray moved away to get away from you all in the drama, and you all won't let him be. I'm like, leave him alone. I feel like Heidi in Closet, there's a season of Drag Race. It's like season 11 or 12. Maybe it's season 12. I think it's season 12. But on that one, like, this one person, this one drag queen is getting, like, just bullied like Ray in this moment. And Heidi comes in being like, leave her alone. Can't you see she's bothered? It's like, I just feel the same way. I'm like, dear God, leave Ray alone. So then, of course, they take that picture next to him, and Ray thinks something's up. And Ray's like, what's going to happen to my adoptive sister? Is there anything I can do right now? And I feel for Ray, because what I was going to get at, and what I'm going to get at later, is if it were just a relationship, like a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you see somebody like Kyoko, you run for the hills. You leave. Absolutely not. Someone that's as toxic as Kyoko, nope, you say, here's your voucher for some therapy. Bye. Peace out. And you go live your best life. But it's complicated for Ray because he's technically her foster brother. And he feels like somebody, and Ray's so kind and so nice that he's like, somebody has to try to help her. And I guess it's going to be me. And I'm like, dude, you are putting on the biggest cross to bear, because that takes a lot of, like, I wish I was as empathetic as Ray. I wish I was. But my brother's not a train wreck like Kyoko, thank God. So I'm like, ugh. But yeah, he's like, what should I do? And all he knows to do is be nice to her and tolerate her, because that's all he knows to do. And she doesn't really have any other support, not because it's not there, but because she won't seek it out. And he's like, all I can do is be nice to her, and maybe she'll change a little bit. So before we get to Kyoko, he goes out to the pond and he talks about the koi fish and how neither of them want to sever their relationship, but why do they always pass each other by? They don't want to sever the relationship, but they never touch, right? They never stop and look at one another. And I feel like in some regards, Ray is trying to compare his relationship with Kyoko maybe to the koi fish, being like, he doesn't want to sever that bond with his sister because it's a bond, because he's nice, but he's also like, I can't connect to her, so what do I do? Then they have the sun shower, and the reason why I said it in the discussion is because it's like an old wives' tale where I'm from, that if it rains on a day where it's sunny outside, the next day it's going to rain at the exact same time. Scientifically, it's been proven somewhat. I feel like it still happens around the same time the next day, so there you go. But God, we get Soya, and it's just silent. Like snow. Like we always see Soya connected to snow, and I love that it's so quiet. It's so quiet around him. He doesn't talk ever. So I'm like, is he mute? Is he not able to talk? I wonder, they keep on doing the theme of silence with him, that he's quiet and that there's silence. So I don't know either, can he not speak? Can he not hear? I don't know. Like silence, is he mute so he can't speak at all? But then how does he do game reviews? How do they review games if he can't speak? And if he can't hear, he still responds to how people, I mean, maybe he has a hearing aid, so he just takes it out and puts it back in at the end of the match. I mean, if you couldn't hear and you could zone and you could tune out everything but the game, that would explain why he's really, really good at it. Because if you are just focusing on your senses on the board in front of you, you're not listening and distracted by any other sounds around you. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe he has like a hearing aid that he can put in to help him hear when it's time for the review. Maybe he can read mouths. Nobody's using sign language around him, so that makes me think that he can hear, but I don't know. Or maybe, maybe the chairman's just really insensitive, and maybe the chairman's insensitive and is just yelling at him. I do want to note that his shoulders are always hunched, like he has this distinct body language of just being like he's been hunched over the shogi board this entire time. He looks a lot like Ray. He looks and acts a lot like Ray at this point, which is interesting. But he took my breath away. I didn't sense him there at all. I love the idea of him not being human, and I love the idea, there's so much in this scene that I absolutely love. I love the shot of Shimada with the rain against the background, like the sky breaking open and it's starting to pour, and that shot of him just sitting there at the table waiting for the match to begin, like he's contemplating. Oh, so good, so good. Then we have the chapter called Water Surface. And we see everybody just move out of the way when he comes in because he has all this notoriety. And I love the silence of the shogi hall in the hotel, like counterbalanced with the rain being muffled outside in the storm. So good. It's so good. Now, another thing that makes me think he might be mute is that we don't ever see him talk. We saw Shimada stand up and talk before the match, but not Soya, which is interesting. Also, the shot where Soya slowly ages and gets older over time as it changes, and seeing his face slowly change but still look the same, that part was so well done, that he's never corrupted. But then I also love the idea that he's like this pure and white innocent being like snow. And I love the line, he could be compared to a god. However, someone once said, I bet that the devil has the same kind of face. Oh, I love the idea of, is he an angel? Is he a demon? He's a demon of shogi, obviously. And with that smile. So you have like Soya and Shimada, Nikaido and Rei parallels, all that stuff going on. So good. So good. But yeah, 3 weeks have passed since I became a challenger. He's like, I have to beat the monster twice and get 2 white stars. So Shimada explains that he has to win 2 matches. He's like, otherwise I'll never get there. Because if he doesn't win 2 matches, you know, because it's best 4 out of 7 is how you do. He's like, so if I lose match number 1, which he's lost the first match. He's like, if I win the second match and win the third match, then we have to have a 4th match. If I can win even if I lose the 4th match, we'll play a 5th match. And like, if I lose the 5th match, then I could still win the 6th match and then have the 7th match. But if you don't win 2, at least before you get to that 4, if you lose 4 in a row, it's over. If you lose 4 in a row, it's over. But he's like, if I can win at least 2, then I know I can get there. And at that point, he says there's a tournament schedule. So there is a match. There's a match on the 3rd, it looks like. There's a match on the 10th, a match on the 19th, a match on the 25th. Oh, okay. So there's like the 3rd and the 4th is one. The 2nd, the 10th and the 11th, the 19th and 20th, the 25th and 26th, the 2nd and 3rd of April, the 9th and 10th, and then the last one's the 17th to the 18th. So he's like, if I can make it to the 6th match, then that one's in his hometown. He's like, if I can get to the 6th match and win, I can either possibly win the tournament or I can at least get my hometown match and then have the final one be a showdown. And like he's like, that's my goal. My goal is to make it to the 6th match. Yep. And I like that Ray's just like, it's a 7-match showdown and he's contemplating like how that's going to go down. And then so he lost the first one, but we don't know any other results after the first match. Then Kyoko shows up looking like Carmen Sandiego or Inspector Gadget with that coat. I like that they're both on either side of the underpass, showing that distance between them. Also connecting to the koi pond reference where he's like, we just pass by, but we never stop. Right? I do appreciate that Ray is more forward with her. He's like, what do you want? He's not as shy and timid around her as he was before. He's like, what do you want? What's going on? And I'm like, girl, if you were just nice to Ray, if you just tried to be like just congenial in your congenial era for a hot second, things would be so much better for you, girl. I'm like, but why? And she's like, oh, well, the first thing she says is that you snitched on me. And he's like, no. And I like that he's like, the fact that Ray emailed her first being like, hey, you probably saw the photo of my dad and I didn't tell him anything. Just wanted to let you know so you're not freaking out. And what does she do? She freaks out. And of course she spins around and she's like, well, he put a stop on my credit card and he's been bombarding me with questions. And at that point I was like, oh my God, girl. So she's mad because the credit card that she got from him, he put a stop on. I'm like, oh, poor baby. You're 22. Get your own damn credit card. But basically, she was using his money. And she got mad because he was like, hey. And the thing about it is, she like, and yeah, you could be mad that he got in trouble. But I'm like, girl, you were spending his money and now you're mad that he cut you off because you aren't coming home and talking to him? Tears. I'm like, oh, tears. Oh, boo-hoo. It's like, and he's bombarding you with questions, probably because he cares about you and wants to know what the fudge you're doing. I'm like, oh, I don't feel bad, girl. Don't feel bad. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? And then she's like, what am I supposed to do? It's all your fault. I'm like, well, one, you should talk to your dad. You should probably answer some of his questions. Two, it's not Ray's fault at all. You're just projecting your own problems onto someone else. And I'm like, Ray's about had enough. He's like, I didn't say anything. Look, I told you I didn't say anything, and you brought this all on yourself, sis. I like that he's like having this quarrel with her like a sister. I'm like, how I ever shipped them, I'm like, oh, those days were terrible. I feel bad that I did. But I'm like, I like that he's like, look, you did this yourself. And actually tells her like it is. And you know what? She's like, brought it on myself. What's that? I'm like, girl, bitch, what do you think it is? And she's like, are you looking down on me? And I'm like, no, just telling you the harsh reality. And she's like, well, who do you think you are? And then she says, all you do is whine pitifully and play messy shogi. And I'm like, at that point, she's just projecting her own insecurities on him, which is pathetic. She's just like, I'm like, girl, you're the one whining. Like, and you're the one who plays messy shogi. And he's like, that has nothing to do with this. And that's when Momo and the sisters show up. And so here's the thing. Akari is like, hi. She's like, sorry, we're here. I feel like Akari, who's not that much older than Kyoko, I want to take inspiration from Akari because I was very much like Hina. I'm like, I'm pissed off. F her. What is she doing? Why is she being mean to Ray and bullying him? He doesn't deserve this. She needs to go fix herself, whatever. And I feel like I should draw some inspiration from Akari, who's being very mature. And she's like, look, she probably realizes that Kyoko's a mess and that Ray's too nice and that he's helping her out. And she's like, it's not any of our business. Ray's nearly an adult. When he wants to come see us, he'll come see us. But he needs to work this out. It's not any of our business. But Hina's like, I'm going to be nice regardless. She's like, excuse us. We'll be on our way. And so it's funny that Kyoko thought that Akari was Momo's mom. It's funny. And Hina's like, she's like, it's too bad, but he was in the middle of something. And so Kyoko heard Momo call her a witch. Right? And I feel for Hina. Like, my shipping radar for Hina and Ray went up, like, a lot this episode. Because the girl was trying to look out for him. I'm like, good. And she's like, is she a witch? And I'm like, well, Kyoko, of course that little girl thinks you're a witch because you're being terrible and you're being awful and cruel to someone. And it's like, it's good that I'm glad Kyoko had someone tell her that. So that maybe, because Ray's too nice. Ray's too nice to be like, you're being a witch and you're being ridiculous. Even though he's kind of said that to her already. And she thinks he's the bad guy. So of course she's like, well, of course you'd call me a witch. You're terrible. But to have someone on the street call her that because she's being ridiculous. I'm like, good. Maybe Kyoko, if she hears other people say it, will do something about it. Right? And she's like, it can't be helped. Which basically is Akari saying, yes, she's being awful. But let's go home. It'll be all right. We'll leave him to it. It's not our business. But Hina's like, and Hina's, not put off by her at all. Akari's like, Ray's dealing with a strong-willed girl. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, who are those people? And I like that she, like, puffs her chest out to make her look more mature. And I'm like, girl, come on now. And he's like, oh, they're in the neighborhood. And what she says next is so uncalled for. She's like, oh, that's going to be the next home, huh? You're going to put on the woe is me act and win them over, huh? And she's like, what, are you going in another house and messing up another family? And I'm like, bitch, you have no right. And when she says you're a nasty piece of work, I wanted to smack her so hard. I'm like, bitch, if Akari had heard her say that, I think she would have spoke up. But she didn't. I'm like, Kyoko, you are the nasty piece of work. And Ray is not that. But for her to say that to him when he's struggling with depression, oh, I'm so glad Hina went back. That Hina didn't leave him alone. She's like, I'm so irritated. I love her. She's like, we've never seen him look like that before. She's like, and also, she's like, I don't want him to feel bad. She's like, Sis and I made them. So cheer up and eat them. And she was going to say something to Kyoko, but then she was like, no. But yeah. She's like, I'm so pissed. What's with her? She's like, don't use the word pissed. And she's like, and Ray too. And Akari's like, yeah. She's like, I get where you're coming from just a bit. So then to add, like, insult to injury, like, Kyoko just goes back to his house, eats all of the food that the sisters made for him, bitches about it half the time. She's like, oh, this is actually okay, but I'm gonna get fat eating it. I'm like, then don't eat it, bitch. And then she calls them a hag as Ray's heating up, like, water to put in his ramen noodles. And she's like, see how domestic... I'm like, girl, you have so many insecurities. It's not even funny. But she eats the food and then suggests that... and then makes herself at home, like, steals his clothes, won't leave. And he's like, just go home. And then she calls the parents, tells them that she's at his house, which at least she calls her dad. And tells him that. The funny thing is she wears the cardigan that's her father's, which is... I think the most emblematic thing about it is that this girl who says she has so many daddy issues and she's complaining about how bad her dad is, was relying on his money and is sitting there coddled up in his cardigan. I'm like, girl, you need to talk to your dad and just patch things up or find something to do, girl. Then she tries to ask if Ray's in a relationship with either of them, and he's like, no, they're just nice people, which says a lot for Ray. He's like, do you only view people you can be in a relationship with if it's romantic? Because that's not how the world works. And then he's like, why do you think that? And she even suggests that he has a relationship with Momo, and I was like, girl, that's going too far now. So yeah, then she passes the phone to Ray, and he's like, I don't understand Kyoko anymore. And he's like, me neither. We agree on that since, Dad. Yeah. And I feel like the charm might be from Godo. And he's like, what are you going to do? And he's like, what are you going to do? And then Ray says that her dad is worried about her. And her response is she's like, I don't care. She's such a brat. I'm like, she is. She's like, Dad's out of sync about something. He said, if you have a boyfriend who's taking care of you, then bring him to the house so I can meet him. And I'm like, that is a normal thing for a parent to ask. I don't know why this is a problem, girl. Yeah. And she's like, the man's 20 years older than me and married. Well, that would be the problem. And he was your dad's former disciple. That would be a problem. And I'm like, and Ray's like, then why are you with him? What's the deal? And the answer to that question is because she knew it would piss her dad off. Because that's a bratty, childish thing to do. And that's what she's done. And I'm like, you know exactly why you're in a relationship with him, to piss your dad off. But then your dad's trying to be helpful and you're just like, no, he's being weird. Whatever. I'm like, no. And then she's like, that girl called me a witch. And if I was a witch, I wouldn't have such pathetic hardships. I'm like, your pathetic hardships are that you have unresolved issues that you need to work out with yourself. And you're not growing up and taking responsibility. That's what it is. I'm like, your dad has not really abandoned you. He's offered you a place to stay. He's giving you money. He seems to care about you. You just aren't communicating what your problems are. And if you did, it might get better, but she won't do that. Ray is a saint for dealing with her. And she's like, what should I do, Ray? I'm scared. The only time I felt remotely sorry for her was when she said she was scared and what should I do? And the problem is you're asking a guy that you're mentally abusing that is depressed and can't get his own life fully secure yet. He does not have the resources and willpower to take you on as well. And it's just like, yeah. And so I do get why Ray is somewhat trying to help her, but girl is a piece of work. And he's like, sees that she's obviously, I don't know if she's texting Godo in this moment back and forth, or if she is trying to look up other things or seeing if her dad texted her or what, but I feel like Ray's like, I just watched her from a distance and it felt like I was sinking to the bottom of the sea with her. I hate that Ray feels obligated to help her keep from sinking when he himself is struggling. I hate that for him. But I do like that he takes the resolve. She was like, well, I'll see you around. And he's like, He's like, he like doesn't want to encourage her behavior. But at the same time, I feel for him. I really do. And he's like, nothing has changed between us. We haven't able to become siblings nor remain strangers. They're in this weird limbo. He's like, we can't just be strangers where we ignore each other and do the restraining order and get away, from one another. We can't do that, but we also aren't close enough to be siblings. We're in this weird dynamic. And he's like, I want it to be one or the other, and nothing's changing. We're just stuck in this rut. And I feel for him. I really do. And so then he goes to hang out with Shimada and them. And Shimada, it's just like everyone else around him is very understanding and kind, which is what Ray needs. And he's like, go on, get inside. Nikaido's been waiting for you. And Nikaido just like leaps into the foyer. So he's beaten our dear beloved shogi player voiced by Suda. He's beaten him in battle, and he's now the same level as Ray. And so he's like, me and you, we're going to play together. And Shimada's like, well, I managed to keep my rank. I held on by a hair. And of course, he's like, his hairline's receding. So he's like, what can I do? And they make a joke out of it. I do like the one guy, is it Moreau? Minot? His Union Jack sweater is great. I love it. And then Nikaido's like, I'll be waiting for the day that we have a match together. Right? Rival. I love it. It kind of feels like it's setting up Nikaido like urging Ray to keep playing on so they can be rivals, just like Soya and Shimada are, right? And Ray says, when Nikaido said that to me, his face shone so bright, I had to squint. And in my eyelids, what does he say there? And in my eyelids, I saw the morning river's surface. And he's like, I'll turn 18 next month, and I'll become a second-year high school student 1 year behind. He's like, without being able to change anything. So he's like, even though this new year started, even though I'm going to be a year older, even though I'm going to the next term of high school, he's like, nothing has truly changed as they're sitting there playing. But again and again, a new spring will come. So it feels so bittersweet. He's like, a new spring is coming. So there's a chance we can change. I just have to make it work. And I'm like, I feel for Ray. Ray is a better man than I could ever be. He truly is. I'm like, damn, Ray. I'm like, you are a better man. Oh, it just gets me. It gets me. Anyway, so we have this end card that is at the end here. It's by Yuki Suetsugu. I love the style. I love the colors. I love the three sisters with Ray, and I love the snow theme, which seems to fit Soya with this snow theme with his white hair and his silver eyes. I love it. Yuki Suetsugu, if you don't know her, she is apparently the mangaka for Chirufuyu, which is about this I know it's this type of card game. I don't know exactly what type of manga it's about. It's been on the polls before. It nearly won. It got second place. So I feel like it's going to be a manga or anime that I eventually watch. So I feel like Chiya Furu, this mangaka's work is one I'm eventually going to react to on the channel, which I'm really, really excited about. But yeah. Oh, Kyoko. She made some slight progress. Tiny. The babyest of baby steps this episode. And I know some people love her. They're like, she's such a well-developed character. I was like, I feel like Hina this episode, but I'm going to try to channel Akari and be a little bit more mature about it. Even though I would have kicked her to the curb a long time ago. When it's family, it's different. But if it wasn't complicated, it wouldn't be March Comes In Like a Lion, would it? So anyway, in any case, I'm excited to hear your comments down below. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 18 of March Comes In Like a Lion.